Okay, so you did what you know every good teacher does, right? You make some class rules, you go over the consequences, you repeat yourself about 1,000 times, and 6 months in, your students are still doing annoying, disruptive things. Why? Hello historians, and welcome back. It's so good to be back with you after much needed time away. I just wanted to take a quick minute before we start with today's video in thanking everyone, and I mean everyone who reached out through any of my platforms, messaged me, sent their condolences. This really has been a very challenging year for me, but I'm excited to be back. And I'm extremely thankful to be surrounded by an amazing community of teachers, which is all of you. So thank you so much for being here. Now, if you're new here, hi, my name is Cecilia Tamez. I'm an educational consultant and instructional strategist. And my mission is to help passionate history teachers such as yourselves feel confident and be competent as they facilitate student-centered learning. So I got my notes ready. Let's do this. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about some classroom management strategies you've probably never heard of. Now, to be clear, in education, you've heard of everything, because in education, everything is recycled. We already know things come back 20 years later and they're just given a different name. However, it's not very likely that you have heard these strategies or these recommendations framed within the classroom management context. So I'm going to be sharing 5 classroom management tips that are going to make all the difference in your classroom. Your first classroom management tip that you've probably never heard of is your classroom environment matters. Now, I know at the beginning of the school year, I'm pretty sure that the majority of Pinterest traffic comes from teachers. And it may be mostly, and no hate because I was one of these teachers, but it may be from teachers that are looking to freshen up their classroom because they've had the same decor for 20 years, or it may be from a new educator who wants to, go all out and be that teacher. And those are both good and fine. But let's talk about how our classroom environment affects our classroom management. When talking about classroom management, and if you want a classroom that is easy to manage, and when I talk about manage, I'm not talking about micromanage. I'm talking about logistical managing. You want to choose function over aesthetics every single time. And that's mostly because your decor, your setup, your layout could actually be working against you and undermining the ambiance you're trying to create. So it's just basic psychological things, right? You have a classroom that is over decorated. It's going to be fascinating, amazing, a little too amazing. And you know what that means when students are distracted? So be prepared for that. So again, our environment may undermine what we're trying to create as management, as far as engagement. Same thing for decor that is not practical. You want to decorate your classroom, Harry Potter, cool. Just make sure that, your door closes. You don't have coverings or hangings or things like that that make it difficult to reach or access certain materials, because unfortunately, we need to, as educators, we need to remove all paths of resistance for our students. If they see that it's too difficult to access certain materials because, you set up your material station in a place that's awkward, difficult to access, your students are going to be like, oh well, I guess I couldn't get my materials. And then you have students there sitting in your class for 20 minutes twiddling their thumbs, and you're wondering why nothing is getting done. As a general rule, you want to make sure that you have visibility, accessibility, and simplicity. Those are the characteristics of a classroom that will support your classroom management system, your routines, your procedures. Classroom management tip number 2, be willing to explain the why. Now, I'm probably going to give my age away, but most of us may have been raised in a generation where you do as you're told, and how dare you, and who do you think you are, little kid, in asking your grown-up for an explanation of why we're doing things or why we're doing things this specific way. So if you were raised in a generation where this was the norm, which again, I was, it's very difficult to break out of that pattern and, dare I say it, humble ourselves a little enough to understand that taking the time to explain to our students the logic behind what we're doing, even though we may feel as adults that we don't owe our students an explanation because, hello, we have the college diplomas. Understand that it's going to serve a purpose to gain student buy-in. It's going to help you. It's okay to explain to a child the logic for why we're doing things. As your students grow, so maybe starting in the junior high, secondary level, you are going to have more questions as to, well, why are we doing this? You've heard those comments from your students, the why do we have to? And so, believe it or not, humor them and say, this is why we're doing things. And the thing is, when you are able to explain cohesively, succinctly, why you are doing things, and you have an answer for their question, especially one that makes sense to them, one, they have to acknowledge that you actually know what you're doing. Students will gain trust and that whatever it is you're doing in your class, it has a purpose. Now, here's something that's very important to keep in mind, especially with kids. If they don't understand how whatever it is they're doing benefits them, this is very important. How does doing this benefit me? If they don't understand that, if you're not pitching the why from the angle of this is how it's going to benefit you, then you're not going to have that buy-in. They're not going to be entirely convinced to participate, to engage, to pay attention, to let you teach. Anytime that you do explain the why, you want to make sure you think of this from the student perspective. How is this going to benefit them? For example, one of the routines I really wanted to get my students into the habit of doing was putting their backpacks underneath their desk. And the thing is, if I just tell my students, all right, folks, don't forget to put your backpack underneath your desk. Yes, I'll repeat it about 1,000 times and maybe or maybe not, they'll be doing it by the second to the last month of school. But if I say, okay, my pretty people, I'm seeing bags in the aisles and y'all know, okay, Miss T was not the most athletic person in the world and I am wearing my cute shoes today. I'm not good at jumping hurdles, let me tell you. And I don't want any of you fine folks to be tripping over bags and then your entire season goes down the drain. So I don't want to see any of you in crutches. Crutches are not fun. Trust me, the armpit rash is real. So please make sure that your bags are underneath your desk. All of a sudden, there's humor. There's an angle for your students. All of a sudden, like, oh, it is convenient for me to make sure my bag is underneath my desk because if I break my arm or my leg or my face tripping over my bag, I don't get to start, in the next big game. Now, being able to have an explanation as to why you are doing things a certain way in your classroom and why they need to work this way and need your students' cooperation in making sure that things get done a certain way is very important, especially when you're trying to get your students to follow class routines and class procedures. So if you want to know how you can get your students to get with the program and get on board with your class routines and procedures, comment piggyback in the comments below. Classroom management, tip number 3, don't be afraid to share management with your class. I can tell you that early on in my career, I was terrified. I didn't understand. I couldn't even fathom. Given what I had seen my first year teaching, I was like, what do you mean? Let the students get involved in creating the classroom expectations. What do you mean you're going to let students come up with their own classroom contract? Like, how does that even work? Or, what do you mean you're going to get students input for what rules they want for the class? To me, it seemed like a horrible idea. It terrified me because in my mind, I saw sharing management with my class as them running amok, doing whatever they wanted. And so I was very much determined to stick to the Miss Trunchbull style of discipline. However, over time, I realized what sharing management with your student actually means is essentially asking students what helps them learn. What would the classroom need to be like? What would their classmates need to be like? What would their teacher need to be like in order for them to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel respected, and then working together to establish some expectations that will reflect those student needs and teacher needs. So all of us together, a collaboration, if you will. Now, what I really like about involving your students in the management of your class versus you just sitting down to plan and plot everything, these are my rules, these are my consequences, engaging your students in the management of the class and asking them, hey, what makes you feel safe? What makes you feel respected in class? What does a class need to look like, be like, feel like to you? That also shifts an accountability to your students because they are helping to co-create the classroom environment. They're telling you what the classroom needs to be like, and then you work with them to create the expectations, and you agree to support the class in making sure that those expectations are being met so that your students' needs are being met. So when you're sharing this, you're also sharing the accountability. You can tell your students, okay, hold up, slow your roll. You told me at the beginning of the school year that you wanted a classroom where this, and this was happening, that this was going to help you feel safe and respected. We have set that up, but I don't see you collaborating to ensure that that happens. So I'm going to need us to make sure that we're holding up, or that you all, as my class, you're holding up your end of the expectations, right? Because you can go back and be like, this was your all's idea. I'm just here to help facilitate what it is and the classroom that you all said you wanted. So if the classroom is not the way you said you wanted it, it's because you're not doing your part, right? So we're sharing that accountability. Now, one of the greatest benefits of sharing that accountability and shifting it to your students is that you no longer become like this police force in your classroom. And when you're not the policing entity in your classroom, then there's no authority figure to challenge per se. You remove the resistance that there might be if a student has, a trauma or has a negative experience with authority figures, and therefore that creates their resistance. You're removing that because you're positioning yourself as, I'm only the facilitator of the system or the expectations that you all said you wanted. And that's going to help minimize power struggles, eliminate defiance, because they're not your rules and expectations. It's all of ours. It's theirs. Now, this is something we talk about in much greater detail in my personalized teacher mentorship program, Teach Like an Influencer Academy, where I actually help my mentees to put together a collaborative management system that works for them. I also support my mentees with other highly requested topics like how to restore rapport with a student after it's been broken, how to reset your classroom management, and also proactive strategies for dealing with common classroom management challenges. Now, if you would just love for me to be your mentor this school year, and you'd like to join a community of passionate history teachers who cheer each other on while doing the hardest, coolest, most influential job in the world, I will leave the link for you in the description so that you can join via Patreon today. Please don't peg me as a negative Nancy for the next one, but your fourth classroom management tip you've probably never heard of is be proactive versus reactive. Usually when we are learning about classroom management in our teacher training programs, when we attend workshops, these trainings or these workshops, these lessons, they show us how to deal with issues that are currently happening. And that's also very important knowledge to have. But when talking about classroom management, we want to be proactive, because if not, then we're going to expend energy and sprout a lot of gray hairs trying to, what's that word that those PR people use? Oh, yes, damage control. Later, you're going to have to damage control as circumstances are unfolding. Unfortunately, one of the questions that we always need to ask ourselves, no matter what we're doing, whether we're setting up our classroom, creating a lesson, planning an activity, getting ready for a special assembly, presentation, event, whatever, is what could go wrong? Again, we're not trying to be negative here. We're just gearing ourselves with the skill. We're equipping ourselves with some proactive approaches. When we think ahead of what typically disengages our students, we can adjust our instructional approach, our lesson delivery, to make sure that we prevent that or avoid that. Now, obviously in education, everything's going to be an experiment. So you might be trying an alternative that maybe still doesn't end up working. But each time you're going to learn something different about what does and does not disengage your student, and you will be able to adapt accordingly. And once you figure it out, once you get that answer that you're looking for, like, oh, this is what works for this class, you'll be able to apply that similar knowledge to everything else you do. So it's kind of like one key is the skeleton key that's going to unlock things. If you know that students being grouped with other certain students is going to be problematic. If you know that sitting too much during a lesson makes your students fall asleep, which frustrates you, which ends up making you have to reteach the lesson. If you know that students are triggered by something and it makes the class rowdy, or maybe your class doesn't have the best sportsmanship, so when you're playing a review game, things get a little too heated, too competitive, and it gets personal, and that becomes a problem. You can plan ahead. Now, as I mentioned, because everything in education is an experiment, and you may be trying another option and maybe that option doesn't work even though you tried to be proactive, the next best thing when dealing with a problem that you couldn't possibly foresee, maybe didn't have enough experience or don't know the students well enough just yet, is to always offer options. For example, let's say that I'm walking around the class and I see a student, everyone else is doing their work, this kid is just twiddling his thumbs. We want to start with what we see. Little Timmy, I observe that, fill in the blank. And this is what needs to be happening. And then we offer our options, right? Did you need a pencil, little Timmy? Is that what's holding this child back from participating? So did you need a pencil? Did you need me to read you the instructions? Would you like to work by yourself? Do you need to cool off and come back in 5 minutes? Etc. When dealing with unforeseen circumstances, you never want to resort to making threats or statements that sound like ultimatums that leave no room for students to make decisions, because then you're putting them in a corner. And you know what the old movie adage says, nobody puts baby in a corner. Just kidding. Because authority is always going to be challenged. So if you are going to make a statement, you are now gambling your credibility. If you cannot follow through and exert that quote unquote punishment or that consequence, or it's not in your hands, it's not in your power to exact that consequence. Maybe it's in the hands of an administrator, and if they don't exact it, you just gambled your credibility as a facilitator. You are now a powerless figure. So never gamble your credibility. Classroom management tip number 5, win your students over, essentially by showing up for them even outside of class. Now this I know for a fact. I know that you have heard the saying, kids won't care unless they know that you do. Cringe, but true. It doesn't matter what era we live in, how much time goes by. We're human beings, and so there's going to be some tendencies that are instinctual in us forever. And this is going to be one of them. We're not going to be invested in someone, in following someone, in being influenced by someone unless we feel that they're genuine, that they care, that they have our best interest in mind. Now, I have to say that one of the rare advantages of being a young single teacher is that I had a little bit more flexibility in my schedule in order to be present for things like UIL events and concerts and football games and tournaments. And so this allowed me to show up to these extracurricular events. And now, mind you, you don't have to attend all of them because that's a lot. You don't even have to stay the whole entire time. I sometimes stayed between 5 and 10 minutes, just enough. The trick is to get a couple of your students to see you, because they are going to be your witnesses that you were there, that you did show up. And also when you're there, I know we're really tired, but we want to look enthusiastic, and I know we do. If you're here on this channel, it's because you're a passionate teacher and you truly do want to make a difference as best you can. Now, we don't have to sacrifice our wellness, but while we're there, we're going to look enthusiastic. We're going to give our students a smile. We're going to be like, good job. Because sometimes our students' parents are working, and that's all the affirmation that they'll receive. And believe me when I say, this small gesture on your behalf is going to make a world of difference in the management you see in your classroom. All you need is a couple of students to be ambassadors of your coolness, of how much you care, and you'd be surprised that peer pressure works for good things too. Now, if you found this video helpful, I invite you to consider being a supporter of this channel through Patreon. As a League of Extraordinary Teachers member, I know, how very Wild Western of me, where you'll get early access to new videos, exclusive behind the scenes, monthly Q&As, and so much more. You can also support this channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with a teacher friend. As always, I'm rooting for you. You got this, and I got you. Until next time, Class dismissed.